Hey Exeteers, thanks again for stopping by. If you're new to the channel, my name is Riley and I am a former Jehovah's Witness. And today I have the extreme pleasure of being joined by some ExJW panelists, some very distinguished ExJW panelists. So we have in the house Mark from the Is It Really So channel. Hi Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Hey Riley, thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, me too. And we also have Matt from the Falling Tower channel. Hi Matt, how are you doing?
Oh, pretty good, thank you. Good to be here with you guys.
Thank you, thanks for joining us. And last but not least, we have Wally from the JW Thoughts channel. How are you doing, Wally?
It is the hottest day in record in Seattle today, and I only have portable air conditioners, and I'm absolutely dying in the studio. So I'll be a little bit hot and sweaty here in a few minutes, but I am doing great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for joining us. So today we are going to be discussing how to debunk JW Doctrine using their own literature or using independent, as in non-apostate sources. And I think that this is a really important subject to speak about, because I'll give you a little bit of background why I wanted to address this issue. Is because when I started waking up, and the first time that I gave myself permission to view apostate literature, I had a full-on anxiety attack. Literally, my heart was pounding, my hands were shaking as I was trying to type into the search engine, I was sweating, and it was a really extreme reaction. And it's one that I've found is very, very common in people who are waking up and researching the organization for the first time. So I thought it would be helpful to show people who are not quite at the stage of looking at apostate literature, but questioning the doctrine and asking themselves if it really is the truth. I thought it would be a good thing to show them how they can actually answer those questions for themselves without crossing that line of looking at a quote-unquote apostate literature and having a similar extreme reaction like the one I had and like the one that many other PMO witnesses have. So to that end, I assembled a crack team of ExJW researchers. So I've been watching all of your channels for a little while, with the exception of Matt, whose channel is very, very new. But after seeing all of your videos, at least in my mind, you guys represent, really people with really good research skills, which impressed me a lot. So I thought it would be good to get you all on a live stream so that we could do this. So how do you guys feel about it?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I object to the description of distinguished and really good researchers.
Yeah, that's rubbish.
You're bigging us up here, man.
Dream higher.
No, that's just the humility, the JW humility.
Right. Okay.
You still have a little bit of that in there.
Sure.
I hope so.
Okay.
Okay. So, any volunteers? Who wants to go first?
Well, I was like 20 minutes late, so maybe I should go last just for my tardiness.
I'll go. Okay. I don't mind going first. So I could just at least get mine out of the way, get my stress done, and we could just move on from there. If Mark doesn't mind.
Excellent. Okay. The floor is yours, Matt.
Yeah, so mine actually is, I guess, kind of a bit of a cheat, because they call it a non-apostate source is not necessarily true. But when I was waking up, the single most important place that I went to find information was Wfax.com. And what I appreciated about it was the fact that it had so many quotes, so much information that came directly from the publications. So I consider it, in my mind, the greatest resource for factual information. Yes, it may bother some that there is some commentary in there where it speaks about, it kind of gives a little bit of a rundown of some of the issues, but you can easily choose to ignore the commentary portions of it. Just look up what the issue is and then go find the publications, look up the quotes that are referenced, and then you can come to your own conclusion as to what was published. So starting with a source like that has just all of the information, they're ready for you to go. They've done the research for you as far as putting lists together of where the information is. It just really doesn't get too much easier than that. So, so that was my number one recommendation that was given to me. And of course, I'll pass that on. As far as the points of things to keep in mind when you're doing research, things that I try to keep in mind myself that I found helpful is look up every single quote, every single source that's there that's given to you. And so in doing so, that means you're going to need to make use of the Watchtower online library, any personal library that you might have sitting at your house, Watchtower library, CD-ROM, or even if you want to go a little bit older, your Kingdom Hall should have, if they still have an actual printed library or with physical books, you can go there and check it out. But one problem you might run into with publications that are a little bit older than that, particularly things pre-1950, pre-1970, is the fact that you might not be able to find them anywhere because they're certainly not online or on the Watchtower Library CD. So there are online sources for the PDFs for those. So you can choose whether or not you want to trust those if you think they might have been doctored in any way. Or perhaps if someone asks you for, well, how do you know what it says in that publication? You could, of course, suggest this to them to go, perhaps even go write the branch office and ask them for a particular publication, a date, name of it. And so you could get it directly from the branch office. But I do have to give a little bit of a warning with that because if you do that, you might be painting a target on your back because the branch, when you write a letter like that, they most likely know who you are, who your congregation is, who your elders are. And so any kind of response that you get back from them is most likely going to be copied back to the elder body. And they're going to be curious as to why you're investigating older literature, particularly a certain date and page of a publication. And they might be instructed to follow up with you at a shepherding call. So that might be something you'd want to avoid if you are still kind of trying to lay low, but it is always an option for you if you, if you want to find something that's a little bit older and really confirm that an older publication like that is actually true. For some of the things that may be even more difficult to find, such as the secret information, like information given to elders, like the KS10, the elders book, or at least it was the KS10 at that time, and of course the letters to the elders. So of course, if you're a publisher reading through the website, through Wfax, and you see these references, you're really going to have no idea as to whether or not that those publications are, those letters, but quotations are actually real. So again, you could decide for yourself if you want to accept as to whether or not they're valid. Of course, you can go to a website like, at least as of right now, at avoidjw.org, and you can download the current and previous versions of the elder books, the letters, and you can check out those documents for yourself. That was really helpful for me. I was an elder at the time, so I was actually pulling out my letters, my books, and I was comparing them, and I had the benefit of being able to do that. But even once I wasn't an elder anymore, this actually came in pretty handy because I did have someone who tried to challenge me on a policy, and this was a person who wasn't an elder. So I then ended up telling him, well, hey, why don't you go to one of the elders in your congregation, go ask them to go to their elder book and this chapter and verse, and let me know what he tells you that section says. Of course, I never heard anything back after that, but it does kind of come in handy if you know what those secret publications actually say. Again, I wouldn't recommend doing this if you are a PMO because it would pretty much out you immediately. But you could also word your way around it a little bit and ask an elder about a policy. Just do so carefully, maybe perhaps being like, well, what would happen in this kind of a situation? What does the organization say about this? So if you do it kind of carefully like that, you might be able to get some info that would let you know whether or not what he tells you kind of jibes with the information that you're finding out when you're doing your research. As far as going to research that goes beyond necessarily doctrine, at this point, you probably would have been finding out about things that the lawyers, the governing body members, branch committee members, elders, things that have been going on outside of the organization, perhaps in court systems. If you're getting into those kinds of things, such as court cases, you can choose to accept the PDF transcripts that have been provided for you from people that have been made available online, or you can actually go and obtain those directly from court systems, which, of course, it may have a fee associated with it in order for you to get them. But there are various ways that you can go, and you can be sure that you're not getting something from an apostate resource. You can go and double check that pretty much instantly. Now, another point that I found to be really careful on, or pretty eye-opening, when you start finding out about the deception in the organization of publications, is the use of the ellipsis. So the 3 dots that you'll see whenever they're quoting from a certain publication or a person. Every time you see one of those, go and look up that quote, find out where it came from, see what the context of it is, and find out what they're leaving out. You will be shocked at some of the things that you find. This is something that I still do to this day whenever a new publication becomes available. Actually just did it a few weeks ago, and finding out sometimes they're not even shocking, just hard to understand of why they would skip out one word of a sentence. But a lot of times it really becomes clear, the level of deception. And that will be things that will be very helpful for you in the future when someone asks you to prove how the organization has been deceptive with things. If you can lay stuff like that right there out on the table, that's really something that they can't fight against. So that could be pretty helpful. My next tip would be to be careful where you get your information from. I know that kind of sounds like something that the organization would say itself, but it is something that has some validity to it. Even though online forums can be very helpful in providing factual information, new developments, they can give you a sense of community. It can also be a source of unsubstantiated information. You really need to stick to facts that can be proven with concrete evidence. Someone's experience, it may be interesting, applicable, or true, but it's basically useless to finding out the truth and gathering in this information if they don't have hard evidence to be able to back it up. And keep in mind that something that the organization, particularly leadership, has been saying for years is that former members, ExJWs, will twist the truth, they will lie. So if you ever present a witness, a believing witness, with one piece of evidence or one single issue that turns out to be false or unsubstantiated, you've then lost that battle, and you may have in fact lost the war, because you might not ever get a chance to be able to bring that information to them again. Confirmation bias is a very strong player here. Just as a witness is going to count all the hits and ignore all the misses when it comes to their doctrine and to their religion, they'll actually do the exact opposite when it comes to an ExJW and a former member. They will then count all the misses and ignore all the hits. So it'd be very helpful that when you do your research, stick to things that you can prove for a fact and be able to not only prove it to yourself, but to be able to prove it to someone else whenever that's asked of you. And one other thing that would be kind of nice to keep in mind as you're going through your research is starting to figure out and learn what logical fallacies are. I know that's something that Riley probably has a little snapshot of that he can put up on the screen. It's something that may seem daunting to kind of look at some of the list of these things about logical fallacies, how they work. I kind of was a bit daunted by it at first when I saw them, thinking there's no way I'm ever going to be able to memorize these. But you can do it. When things start to not sound quite right, you'll be able to recognize them, you'll memorize them, and be able to call them out when you see them in the publications. So that could be pretty helpful. I didn't know if Riley, if you were putting that up now, or are you just going to maybe do that a little bit later?
I'm trying. I'm really sorry. I always have technical hitches whenever I try to do the screen share, but just give me a second. I'm working on it.
Oh, that's no problem. Well, so while he's working on that, my final thing, final tip that I would just kind of thought that would be helpful would be kind of something that I did when I was going through my research, which was I pretty much pretended that if I weren't a witness, if I weren't raised to believe this, and someone came to my door with this information, what would I say? Would I believe it? And so likewise, it may be good for you to just pretend as though you don't have any skin in the game. Take away any emotional attachment that you have, toward this belief. Pretend that you're an outsider who knows nothing about the organization. Would you find the excuses made for the organization valid, the things that they're using? If any other religion was having to resort to those types of lies, deception, hypocrisy, would you offer them the same excuses, or would you think that they're unreasonable for going along with it? So those are just some of the things that I found helpful when I was going through research, and maybe it could be able to pass it on and help some other people too.
Thanks a lot, Matt. So this is the list of logical fallacies that I found, and there was one in particular that stood out to me, and it was the false dichotomy. Let me just find it. And of course I can't when I absolutely need to.
I swear it never takes this long.
Yeah. Where on earth is it? Anyway, so false dichotomy, which is like black and white thinking. So you'll find that with a lot of high control groups and cults, they'll use black and white thinking as part of their, not necessarily doctrine, and just the overall, their general way of thinking. So they often present the world, or they have the worldview of us and them, or on a particular issue, it will be all the way one way to one extreme, or all the way to the other extreme. Very black and white way of looking at things. And the Watchtower does this all the time. They do this absolutely all the time. And I found a couple of examples of this. Just bear with me. Try and find. But especially when it comes to their view of worldly people, quote unquote, or anyone who isn't a Jehovah's Witness, they have a very, very black and white attitude towards those people. Like here in this example. So here it says, the fact is, your way of life can be pleasing to only one of two masters. Either you are serving Jehovah God or Satan the devil. A principle found in the Bible helps us to appreciate this. And it goes on to quote the scripture. But right there saying you're either serving Jehovah God or you're serving the devil. Very, very black and white. There's no gray areas. So even if somebody is not a Jehovah's Witness, but they're a good person, they could live a very, very moral life. But in the eyes of the organization, they're serving Satan just because they're not a Jehovah's Witness. And that's an example of a very common logical fallacy, which is a false dichotomy of black and white thinking.
Yeah, that's one of the most annoying things that I hate the law of the occluded middle. It's like, why are people always creating these spectrums and saying, well, it's this or this, and ignoring the vast majority of people are going to fall with somewhere in between. It's absolutely wild. And as soon as you learn to identify it, as Matt was saying, you're like, bang, easy, you're free.
I was thinking you guys are the three strangest looking Satan worshippers that I've ever met.
Hell yeah.
You're deceptively friendly and polite. What's going on?
I know. I thought, well, atheists, we worship Satan. Woohoo!
Another logical fallacy that I found interesting was the one about, I can't remember. You're absolutely right, Matt. How are you going to remember all of these?
He said you can.
Yeah.
Come on.
I said it gets a little bit easier. I wouldn't exactly say I can memorize all of them.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember which fallacy this falls under, but it's basically about name calling or attacking the person
Ad
rather
hominem.
than attacking.
Ad hominem, yeah.
Ad hominem, that's the one. Thank you very much. Attacking the person rather than attacking their argument.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I found an example of this in this article, which is the 1986 Watchtower, March the 15th. And the funny thing about this one is that the Watchtower have an article where they're advising people against using an ad hominem argument, but then they're here doing exactly the same thing. What is often the motive of those who criticize the society or those taking the lead? Is it not often that some application of scripture affects them personally, rather than conform to sound doctrine and direction? They want the organization to change. Let us illustrate this with a few examples. And then they go on to list examples. And all they're doing is like calling the people in these hypothetical situations names. Like, what is behind such reasoning? Is it not usually pride and independent attitude, or rather childish desire? You know, and this is the example of somebody who isn't given a certain privilege, you know. So if you feel that you're deserving of a particular privilege and you don't get it, then you're proud, you have an independent attitude, and you're childish.
God, how scary is that just phrase, the independent attitude? Just hearing that just like kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies. You have an independent attitude? Yikes.
Yeah, it's they're kind of gaslighting people in that way too.
Yeah.
They're kind of telling them, look, if you have any disagreement with us whatsoever, you're a child, you're proud, you're malicious, you're wanting to serve Satan. I mean, it's not just, as you said, an ad hominem attack on people who don't conform. It's really, I mean, whether they mean it or not, it's really quite sinister how they're trying to just humiliate people into doing and believing what they want them to believe.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, go on, Wally.
It's funny.
Oh no, Matt, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what's funny about that is like the site that Riley just used there. Wfax actually has I think it's a fallacy chart on their site. If you might have to dig around to find it, but it actually has, I think, a couple of these articles in there where it shows how the organization has printed articles on how to avoid any of these fallacies, and it's all the things they just do themselves, even in the same articles. So it's absolutely hilarious when you step outside the box and look inside and realize that you just never saw it before because you're in your echo chamber.
It's like Donald Trump saying that he is the most honest person in the world. You've never met someone as honest as me before. It's that kind of mentality, isn't it?
Fake news.
Yeah, exactly. So let's take a break for some comments. There's been loads of comments in the live chat. Okay, so this one is from Layman Phil. Seeing the activists united in a good mood to wake up the sleepers is a pleasure to see and hear. Oh, thank you very much, Phil. It's a pleasure to do this, actually. And Mary Miller, when I was PME, I would have considered Wfax an apostate site. Yeah, I get that. I mean, the thing is, Wfax was compiled by an ex-Jehovah's Witness, but the great thing about that site is that it uses JW's own publications to prove the points, and it uses independent sources as well. So it's basically a compilation of all of their own literature that invalidates their own doctrine. which I think, you know, even though it was put together by an apostate, it's an important resource to consider. Gene C, I honestly wonder how many have really woken up and just stay for their own self-importance apart from having family in, because there are so many moments happening now. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I know for a fact there are people with status in the organization, and I wouldn't necessarily say that they're PMO. They might have their doubts, but they would never ever leave because that's the only place where they have status. I mean, that is actually a thing. You know, to be able, I mean, witnesses, as we all know, aren't among the most academically educated people. You know, so a lot of witnesses, especially elders or people with responsibilities in a congregation, have very menial jobs. But then when they walk into the Kingdom Hall, everybody respects them, and they, you know, they're elevated, and that does definitely have a certain appeal to particular types of personalities. So I totally see that being the case.
My ex-wife used to always say that it was all about putting on a suit gives people this newfound sense of importance, and they put on that suit and they feel like they have this minuscule power within the organization, and they just act like absolute I don't know what I can say here. Terrible types of people. I didn't go over the rules. Sorry, I was late. Yeah. But you know exactly what I'm saying.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, feel free to speak freely. I've been demonetized, so it's not going to make a slightest bit of difference.
Okay, no problem. Let me just get them all out of the way real quick. Okay, hold on. It's a joke.
Okay. Cam Schmuck, I haven't read the Elder's Manual in full. I don't want to get that angry on a Sunday. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, really, actually, the Elder's book is so insanely boring for 80-90% of it, but it's when you get to those chapters of the judicial portions, it's insane.
Yeah.
Which is probably the first thing when someone becomes an elder. I guarantee you, for 99% of elders, that's the section that they open up to, so they can find out how this all works.
Blow through it, go right to that. For sure.
Oh boy, that's hilarious. Jenny Bergman, the use of ellipses is telling and so obvious. How did we overlook that for so long? Do you know what? That's exactly how I felt when I realized that for the first time. When it was like in the first couple of weeks after waking up, I was watching Melissa Doherty. I think she spent a brief time as a witness, but I think she's been in several different religions, if I remember rightly. But she was the first person who, like, I saw do that. You know, saw an ellipsis and then went and found the original publication. And I just thought, it blew my mind. I thought to myself, why has nobody ever thought of doing that? Why did I never ever think of doing that? And she just showed so many examples of them blatantly misquoting.
Yeah,
you know, it's really bad.
I had a couple of conversations with a former awake writer in Australia. His name is Ben. He's really nice guy, and I met him in I think it was the Reddit chat. You might know him that, that subreddit chat. And he was telling me effectively his job as an awake writer was just quote mining, just reading through other stuff, just trying to find a quote and trying to find somewhere anyway of, adding some kind of gravitas to the discussion they're having. So and so has said this, and and that's what he said to me. My job is effectively just quote mining other publications to support the viewpoint of the Watchtower. Yeah,
it's very intellectually dishonest, extremely, and manipulative.
And they called it research.
Yeah.
Oh, we're doing research. Hell yeah.
It's ridiculous. You made a good point as well, Matt, about looking at Cork documents. Yeah, I think that's a really, really helpful tip. I saw the original, well, not the original, but online. I saw the Cork documents with the Jimmy Swaggart case. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yep.
No.
Yeah. So this this goes back to the reason why witnesses stopped charging for the literature. It was because of a court case that Jimmy Swaggart was involved in against the state of California. They basically wanted to charge him tax on all of his DVD and book sales. So he went to court with them over it. And I can't remember the Latin term, but there's a legal term that's Latin, that if somebody files a court case where the outcome of that court case could also affect you, you can add yourself to the case without actually being a participant. And that's what the witnesses done with this court case with Jimmy Swaggart and the state of Florida, so that they would benefit from the outcome if it went in his favor. Or it didn't go in his favor, which meant that he owed the state all of that tax. And it also meant that the witnesses would have to pay tax on all of their magazine sales, or placements, as we used to call it. So to avoid that, they basically just stopped charging for the literature.
Wow.
And that is the reason why. And I've seen the court documents for this because they're a matter of public record. You know, so that can hardly be called an apostate driven lie.
It was all because it was too much of a burden on the brothers and sisters, and it was a matter of love that they stopped doing it. Yeah. Come on, you got to spin that history, baby.
That's the thing. And you know, I only found that out early this year, maybe late last year. I can't remember, but yeah, I was really, really angry because that's not the line that they fed us.
No.
Yeah.
That's not the line that they fed us. It just goes to show how dishonest this organization is.
Yeah, they tend to whitewash everything. I mean, you do kind of any kind of scratching at the surface of the history of the organization. It's just totally whitewashed. I mean, when you think back to what you accepted and you know how it evolved and all that thing. It's quite embarrassing. I find it embarrassing personally that I just kind of pretty much drank down the narrative of you know how the organization started, how it evolved, how you know successive presidents were appointed, and all the rest of it. Yeah, it's just a whitewash.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like just looking at the size of the old, you know, history book of the Watchtower versus the new one. It's like one's like this thick and the other one's just like paper thin. Like, we're just gonna tell you the new history. Like, that seems kind of suspicious.
I know it may going into the court document stuff, going into elders' letters may seem it is boring, but going into it is might be kind of daunting for people. But I do remember when I was an elder and we had the letter that came through basically talking about how they were canceling all the loans everywhere. And then, you know, not terribly long after that had who was it, Stephen Lett, that gave the famous broadcast of canceling it and how wonderful God's organization is, how any bank would never do this. Let alone not even mention the fact that any bank would love to have this strategy if they could possibly pull it off. But in the elders letter, when it talks about how we canceled the loans, I remember reading the section of the letter that was only given to elders, which said that the donations that essentially saying all the donations you're going to make will be at least the same amount that you were donating before. So they made it sound like they had canceled everything. And as I was reading it, I was like, this doesn't seem right. Something's messed up here. But of course, when you're a believing person, it just kind of goes over and you don't think about it again.
Right. And then like they subsequently went on to one of the biggest land grabs, you know, in history, just signed over all the kingdom halls to themselves at the stroke of a pen. I mean, we're canceling the debt on your mortgage, but you got to get out because we're taking it from you.
What's really funny, I go hiking quite often, and depending on where I'm going, there's, you know, always kingdom halls that I end up passing on the way. And just this year, I've noticed 4 different kingdom halls that have completely been boarded up and sold and just completely moved on. Just like in the, you know, my area, like 4 already gone. And you know, 100% that's exactly what they were doing when they're like, yeah, let's just hand over all of the deeds to us and we'll take care of it for you. And some of these places are like really far out. So I don't know if it's like a plan just to move to a total Zoom call thing, but yeah, I mean, if there's not another kingdom all within 100 miles of you, well, brothers and sisters in other parts of the world walk for 50 miles, so you can drive for 100. I don't know what the thought process is, but it's wacky.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. Okay, there was one more comment by yes, thank you.
I might have to change my camera battery out. I have a blinking light and I don't know what it is, so if I disappear, that's what happened.
Okay, no problem. Just rejoin afterwards, it will be fine. Okay, Anon, by the way, can't prove this, but I'm currently in Bethel. They have a secret electronic database of all old publications, everything ever digital. More on this when I leave. That's really, really intriguing.
That would be huge.
Yeah, I have
verifying all of those old dodgy PDFs.
Yeah, I have some friends of mine that have said something similar to that. Who, while I was in, that said the same thing. They have access as a Bethelite. That's what they told me. Since I was never able to actually confirm it, I've never really mentioned it. But if that's extra confirmation of it there, then I guess it was true.
That's actually weird because I haven't thought about that in a long time. But my brother, he was in Bethel for a while, and come to think of it, he mentioned that they did have like a digital access that was searchable to older publications. Well, I haven't even thought about that for a minute. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay. Yeah, that's huge. That is absolutely huge. So, Anon, please, could you reach out to me? My contact details are in the video description. Please send me an email. I'd love to have a chat with you. Okay, so let's move on. So, Mark, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, when I was listening to Matt talk, I think pretty much what I'm going to do is pretty much what Matt said, because he was talking about like going back to first principles, right? Where you ask yourself, would you accept this kind of reasoning from another religion? Or like, if you weren't obliged to believe that, would you believe it if someone else told you? And that's pretty much what I've prepared. It's examples of that. And I think something you said, Riley, was really important at the beginning. You said that you gave yourself permission to look at information, and I think that's really like crucial. I think it's probably the linchpin of the entire discussion here, because if someone's not ready to give themselves permission, it doesn't really matter what the source is, right? I mean, like, it could be absolutely ironclad 100% true, but if a person isn't ready to go there, it's not really gonna work. So yeah, like, I think you're right. People do have to just give themselves that permission to look and to reason, as Matt said, from first principles. I was thinking one of the best examples, I think at least, when it comes to just how simple it is Deuteronomy 34, because I had an example recently. I was on Reddit. It was just after the memorial, and this guy was like fully in JW, and he was going on about, why are we not witnesses? What problems do we have? Why do you think our religion is illogical? And so I got into a bit of a back and forth with him, and I said, look, do you want to have a private chat about this? And he said, okay. So we had a Zoom chat, and he refused to like show his face because he thought I might record it. But so we had this conversation, and he said to me, okay, tell me why Jehovah's Witnesses' beliefs are illogical. And I said, okay, I'm going to give you one example. And he said, okay. And he was like, this guy sounded super confident, like there was nothing that could faze him. So I asked him to turn up Deuteronomy 34. And I think it's verse 5 and 6, if I remember correctly. But in this chapter, it discusses Moses' death, his burial, his mourning, and that no one knows the location of his body until this day. And so I asked this guy, I said to him, who wrote the book of Deuteronomy? And he said, I don't know. So I said, okay, you're in a problem when you're telling someone what their beliefs are supposed to be, right? You'll often find this when you're talking to JWs. But anyway, I told him, look, it's Moses. He went off and confirmed that it was Moses. So I said, okay, read Deuteronomy 34, 5 and 6. And when he did, he was totally stumped. I mean, he laughed. I could hear him laughing. And he said, I don't know what to say to that. Because it's just so blatantly and unimpeachably obvious. If you believe that Moses wrote Deuteronomy, and here we have a text telling us that he died, he was buried, and we still do not know to this day where his body is. It's just devastating if you allow yourself to go there. It's just devastating. Now, of course, you might still be able to believe in the Bible, right? You might think, okay, maybe Moses didn't write it. But for me, that was a really important thing to do, to be able to say, okay, I'm supposed to believe Moses wrote this, but it is completely irrational given just these two verses. So what else about the Bible or about my previous beliefs do I need to give some kind of revision to? And so I think that's a very good example when you're reasoning with a Jehovah's Witness. Just using the Bible and just using a very simple logical reasoning, there's no way out of that unless, if you go onto the Watchtower Library, you're going to find rationalizations. I mean, it's obvious you're going to find that, but it's as clear as anything that this couldn't be the case. I think another thing to do with like the writing of the Pentateuch has to do with the language. I read a book by Richard Elliott Friedman, I think it is, called Who Wrote the Bible? And he briefly compared the language of the Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, with the language of Moses' time. And what he said was, in the book, was the language of the Pentateuch is so much more advanced than the language of Moses' time. It's like comparing Shakespearean English to modern English. And so what he pretty much said was, if you found a text and it was in Shakespearean English, I mean, it could have been written today, but it could also have been written in Shakespeare's time. If you discovered a text and it was written in modern English and someone said to you, well, Shakespeare wrote that, it's just literally impossible that could be the case, because the language hadn't evolved to that stage yet. And so, like, that's another simple example, but when you can admit to yourself that Moses couldn't have written the Pentateuch, and this is one of the crucial things of the dogma that is unquestionable. I mean, you go into the Watchtower Library, they will tell you Moses wrote it, and Jesus confirmed that, so it's a fact and it can't be questioned. But if you allow yourself to say, well, that couldn't be the case because it can't, it just opens the door. It's a bit like what Matt was saying. If you just go to first principles, would I accept this line of reasoning from a Mormon or from a Buddhist or whatever, any other religion to defend their sacred text? Any reasonable person is going to say no. And I think just one final thing I think was really important to me was I read a book by Steven Pinker called Better Angels of Our Nature. And he's a psychologist in Harvard, I think it is. And this book was pretty much a discussion of why or how violence and war have declined over the centuries. And when I first saw this book, I just passed it in a bookshop. I was stunned by the title because, as a Jehovah's Witness, I just assumed that war and violent crime had pretty much just increased, no end, pretty much, since year one, and that we were living there's several examples in Watchtower literature where it calls the time that we're living in the age of violence, or that the time period we're in is unprecedented for its violence and its warfare. And this book was just absolutely devastating to that. I mean, it's just, we are literally living in the most peaceful era in human history. We're living in an era where violent crimes are an order of magnitude lower than most of our ancestors experienced. And the period of time since the end of the Second World War is the longest stretch of time that the major powers have not been in a major conflict. I mean, these are facts that you could find out independently, but I was reading all these things page after page and after page, and when I finished the book, I just could not accept the last days dogma anymore, because it just couldn't be true, because the Watchtower and the Bible says the last days would have violence and warfare as a distinctive feature, right? It wouldn't just be a little bit worse. It would be a distinctive feature of the last days. And yet it's not just untrue. It's the opposite thing has happened, right? Violent crime has come down, warfare has come down. And by almost any metric you go by, we're living in a period of time that is the opposite of what the Bible describes the last days to be. And so, and this was something that really struck me, because when I stopped coming to meetings, like a couple of months after I read that book, and the elders came to see me, and one of the elders said to me, Steven Pinker's an atheist, right? And I said, yeah, I do. And his reply to me was, well, what else would you expect him to say then? As if the fact that he was an atheist was the reason he was saying these things, as if there was some kind of cynical ploy on his part to try and manipulate people. And this is the mentality that the organization tries to infect people with, is that it doesn't matter if you're like a tenured professor at Harvard, right? If you're writing something that's different from the organization, you must have some sinister or malevolent aim in mind, because that's all they have to go with. I mean, this elder pretty much just did an ad hominem attack on Steven Pinker because he's an atheist and he's writing literature that contradicts JW dogma. And I was just stunned by that. I was just literally stunned that he would use that as, because at this point, when I was waking up, I had some secret hope that I was just wrong somehow, but that like somebody could correct me and like point something out to me. But after I met the elders and they gave me comments like that, it was just, I just knew I just knew that I had to start over and just think for myself. I had to just look at everything again. And I think what Matt said too is very important. Just because you read something or you see something on the internet doesn't mean it's true, of course. But we're all reasonably smart people, so we can, you can double check things, and you can use your own power of reason, right? I mean, if violent crime has been falling and it fell like precipitously, pretty much at 1914. This in itself is disconfirmation of the last days dogma. The scripture in Deuteronomy 34 is just proof positive that Moses did not write the Pentateuch. So there's like 1,000 issues like that. I'm sure Wally and Matt and yourself could list off 1,000 other things. But I think it's ultimately what you said, Riley. It's give yourself permission. Just give yourself a little bit of permission to go there. Use your own power of reason, and you will find information. And it's a house of cards. Once you let something go, the whole thing will crumble. And that's why the organization just indoctrinates people with this idea that apostates are vicious and they're manipulative and they want to hurt people. Because if you allow yourself to objectively listen to what many people that are called apostates are saying, it just goes straight to the heart of the dogma, and it rips it out. And there's no coming back once you allow yourself to take that first step.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, you made a really important point about things getting worse in JW doctrine. Since we're in the last days, now is supposed to be the worst time in history in every possible metric you can imagine. But ask any devout Jehovah's Witness whether they would prefer to live now or 200 years ago. What do you think they'll say?
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's like we compartmentalize things when we're witnesses, don't we? I mean, like witnesses are not they're not stupid. I mean, I actually have tremendous sympathy for witnesses, especially witnesses who come in from the territory, because they're people who are thinking, right? They're people who look at problems and they want solutions. I mean, yes, they've opted to believe the most trite and trivial solution out there, but for the most part, they're people who see problems in their own life, they see problems in the world, and they want some kind of answer that they haven't been able to formulate themselves. And unfortunately, they've just been led to a dogma that once they're bound to it, is extremely difficult to break free from. But yeah, it's quite sad.
And it's true. I mean, I was raised with an older sister and a younger brother. And at one point, all five of us, including my parents, we were all witnesses at one point. But then I think my sister was the first to leave the organization. Then my dad, then my brother, and it was only my mum and myself who were left. I mean, I'd grown up and gotten married and left home by this time. But I used to work. Sorry, I hope you don't mind me just sidetracking to tell you a little anecdote. But I used to work not far from my mum. So every now and again, and I still had keys to her house. So every now and again, I'd go over to hers at lunchtime and help myself to lunch. Or she'd invite me over and she'd have this big spread. And just on the off chance, I just turned up unannounced one afternoon, and the house was jam packed, full of witnesses. It was like she was having like a lunch party, and there were two circuit overseers there, and one of them, I won't mention his name, but one of them actually has a very famous brother, or his brother is actually famous in the UK. He's a comedian. So I was sitting down eating lunch and talking to this circuit overseer, and he said to me, "So do you have any siblings?" I said, "Yeah, I have an older sister and a younger brother." And he goes, "Oh, are they still in the truth?" And I said, "No, they're not. I'm the only one who's in. They left quite some time ago." And he goes, "How come you're still in? What made you stay?" And I'd never asked myself that question before. So I just paused and I thought about it. I said to myself, the truth gives me answers. The truth tells me why the world is the way that it is.
Yeah.
And that honestly was the reason why I was still in it, because the world made sense to me in the lens of witness doctrine.
Yeah.
But if there's one thing that I've learned since leaving the organization, is that it's possible to have what is in your mind bulletproof logical reasoning and still be wrong if your logic and reasoning is based on faulty or incomplete information.
Right.
And in this case, the faulty information is that the world is 10 times worse than it was in the past, when it's not. And that's something that can be empirically proven, regardless of who it is that's saying it.
Yeah.
Whether the person's an atheist or not. It just astounds me that elder said that to you, Mark, because it's not as if he was speaking of his own initiative, as it says in the scriptures. Everything he said can be empirically proven. So what his beliefs or non-beliefs are shouldn't even matter.
Yeah.
When I brought that point up to my mom when we were talking one time, she said, "Well, in Matthew it says that there's going to be reports of wars, and so really what it's saying is that they're just going to be more well reported on. So it's actually predicting the age of the internet and over-reporting and Fox News and CNN and just the mental fuckery that goes on there. It's so obnoxious. It's like
as laughable as that is, that was actually that was what I did mentally. I was like, okay, even if it's not right, it could be that they're going to hear of it more. So obviously, maybe technology allows us to hear it more because of whatever. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go with that. Man, you will jump through some pretty big hoops to make it work.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's this idea in sociological theory called the Thomas Theorem. Has anybody heard of that? It's this idea that the reality that you believe becomes real for you. So that, I think this is really kind of relevant for witnesses, because if you really believe the world is like depraved and disgusting and getting worse, and there's this special group of people in New York who have this special access to God's Spirit to understand the Bible, and you need to just go on the preaching work and be loyal to the organization and things will work out okay, it starts to actually become real for you. I mean, you start finding information that validates all of these different things until you have this little world of your own that just seems to confirm this ideology, even though all it takes is for you to like step outside that bubble and just to see how untrue it is. If you've if you have this real expectation that this is the way the world works, it's to some extent going to work that way for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was listening earlier on today to the podcast, What Should I Think About? Are you familiar with that?
No.
So it's a really good podcast, by the way. It's by an ExJW called Stephen Mather. So he does the podcast with his daughter.
Sorry, what's it called again?
It's called What Should I Think About? So so I was listening to it earlier today, and they spoke about this thing called the IKEA problem, or the IKEA phenomenon. It's something to do with IKEA, right? So what it actually describes is that when you actually take part in building the dogma in your own mind, because as witnesses, when things don't make sense, you have to do all of these mental gymnastics to make the thing work. Just like when you buy furniture from IKEA, you have to put it together yourself. All right. So somebody done some study somewhere that said that when you take part in building something, you attach a higher value to it because you took part in building it.
Yeah.
So each witness, to a lesser or greater extent, has taken part in building the doctrine in their own mind.
Yeah, it's called the Endowment Effect. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they've taken part in building that doctrine in their own mind, so they're less likely to discard it and more likely to hold onto it because they've had a share in building it just through doing all of these mental gymnastics to make it make sense.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Very, very interesting. Okay, let's.
I have to think that there's so many people in the organization that have like peculiar beliefs just to themselves or their little group of people, their family. And I think that's an example of what you're talking about. Like there is kind of wiggle room for things that the organization will tolerate. I mean, that there's like gray areas that people can kind of fill the space with, and they kind of make it their own. They make the truth their own, right? And that's probably why they become so personally attached to it, because they feel it's like part of themselves.
But they can only be, their own. They can only be themselves up to a point, and then once you hit that point where it butts up against Watchtower Doctrine, done, and you just mentally shut off and stop doing any hard work.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like I remember having conversations while out in service with my brother, because he likes astrophysics like me, and we were just talking about the probability of other Adam and Eve's existing in the universe, and that maybe God had other sort of plans and setups and things that we were talking about. I'm like, so do you think it's actually true? And it wasn't, I don't think it's true. It's, well, it can't be true. And it's that moment where you're as you said, the IKEA effect, where you're putting this into it wherever it like gets right up to the instructions, and it's like, well, no, I have to put the screw in this hole. I can't just move it over a little bit, even if it's more optimal. Maybe you are more clever than the person that actually wrote the manual. Just accept it.
It's so true. Okay, can we have some comments, please?
I'm going to go get some more ice because I'm absolutely dying. So just give me 1 second. You guys do comments. I'll be right back.
No problem. You go for
I'll get my other camera battery just in case.
Okay. All right. Sammy Ytube. So true. We keep looking at the badness in the news to help Watchtower explain why they are the truth. Yet the world keeps getting through traumas like the pandemic and other crimes. Absolutely. I mean, speaking of wars, even when there are wars, I mean, there are less wars, but even when there are wars, less people die.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very true. Gene says, like I said, Nostradamus wrote better prophecies. Yeah, but his prophecies are also very vague though as well. So if you're going to be a prophet, I guess that's the way to do it, isn't it? Okay, Awaken G. I so appreciate all the elders who have come out of the organization and saying what was really going on and backing us up. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely true.
Yeah, it's certainly rough, but I think the more elders, if at all possible, to get out there and do it, and to show, hey, even the guys who are elders, they're leaving just as quickly as everyone else is. Even some of the ex-elder and PMO elder friends that I have, you have guys that are on the platform giving assembly talks right now who are PMO elders and do not believe it, and they are stuck because they're trying to figure out a way to leave so that they can save their family and get out with some manner of dignity, while at the same time trying to mitigate the problems inside the congregation. It is an unenviable situation that they are in. I'm extremely thankful for them because they are trying to mitigate some damage since they're stuck, and also being able to leak information. So for those of you guys who are doing it, I greatly appreciate what you're doing and hope to see you on this side of the camera at some point too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I echo those sentiments as well. I mean, there were a couple of elders that I'm having frequent contact with who are PMO and are in exactly that situation, and I do not envy them at all.
Yeah.
I really don't. I mean, the weight of responsibility being an elder in the first place must be huge. And then, to find out that it's not the truth and you and your family are in, and, you're like a third generation witness, and the pressure, I can't even imagine it. I can't even imagine the pressure.
Some of
So
my
I really
favorite
do
conversations
really
that come
do
through
admire
from the PMO elders that email me or whatever. They're always just super fascinating, and heart absolutely goes out to them, right?
Yeah.
And I see someone mentioning in the chats the David Atlas. He's another one of the ex-elders. It's wanting us to mention that we do have kind of a support group for ex and PMO elders. So if there are any of you guys that happen to come across this video, feel free to reach out to myself or Mark. It's a lot of abuse that you go through, a lot of recovery that you have to deal with, and support going through it. So if any of you guys are out there, feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that. Okay, there was a comment we missed from my good friend Guy121. The endowment effect has two psychological reasons for cause and effect. One is the one you mentioned, Riley, called ownership. The other is loss aversion, where they stick with it regardless of how. Is there a follow-up? Or how both apply to the JWs. Thank you very much for that, Guy. That's very, very insightful. Thank you. Any more comments? Ready to dance again. IKEA investment, building Kingdom Halls. Yeah, it is true. It is actually true, because I've spoken to people who, were directly involved in either financing Kingdom Hall projects or physically building Kingdom Halls. And when those Kingdom Halls get sold, it leaves a bitter taste in their mouth, a really bitter taste in their mouth, which is understandable because, it feels like you've been conned. Yeah. Any more comments? From David Atlas. Thanks, Matt. If you are an elder who is stuck, our Discord chat is 100% anonymous. Thank you very much. If one of you guys could give me a link to the Discord chat, and what I'll do is afterwards I'll put it in the video description.
Okay. Oh. Yeah.
Thank you. The Knowing X. This is much better than going to the Zoom meeting. Thank you very much. Okay, great. Let's move on. So, Wally, you're up next.
Oh boy, your fine guests have already covered pretty much everything that I really had to say.
That's why I wanted to go first.
I guess I could just fill in with my take on certain things. I'm always up for a good rant, so why not let it ride? Yeah, I think they've covered most of the basis about, when you're evaluating the texts or the Watchtower or the Bible, you need to be able to look at it rationally and reasonably. And I know you said give yourself permission to think. I think if you're at this point where you're actually watching this, don't just give yourself permission to think for yourself. Like, force yourself to do it. And it's not easy, and it's not going to be fun and like hunky-dory, but it will be worth it, because it's not you can't be passive when it comes to being indoctrinated ever since you were a child, or maybe you had a tragic circumstance in your life that brought you into it. You need to be sort of aggressive with it. You need to actually take charge of your brain. And that would be my like biggest tip for people is, yes, you can get all of this information, but it won't have any effect on you if you don't have the foundation of logic and reason and how to think. Critical thinking is quintessential before you start pouring in 607 and blood and 1975 and 1914 and all this other stuff. So maybe I'm only using my own personal example, but what helped me so much was that I was reading, Montaigne and Francis Bacon and Nietzsche, and I like was studying philosophy and logic just in my spare time as a window cleaner, because if you're a window cleaner, you got a lot of extra time on your hands. That's why you can pioneer. That's why they all do it. And I think that was so important, because once I hit the point where I did ask that important question, well, is it really so? I was able to properly evaluate it. And then when you look at the counter arguments, and you do the thing that every ex-witness or someone that's still in does when they have that anxiety attack, as you said, you start just pouring through Watchtower literature. But if there's no foundation for that to land on, you might end up in some other cult. You might end up in some other goofy, belief set. And what you should be doing is focusing on the life of the mind and how to actually process and evaluate evidence correctly, and not get bogged down with your own personal comforts. The Watchtower functions as like a mattress. It's just there because it's comfortable, and if you leave the mattress, you'll be on your feet, and hey, I don't want to be on my feet, I'd rather be laying down. It's lazy. And I think that when people leave, and maybe I'm just jaded by messages and YouTube comments and emails and Facebook messages from people that continue the exact same lazy thinking once they've left the organization, and they haven't taken up the task of actually understanding, what a logical fallacy is. Matt, you did a great job of just like, hey, I'll just break it down. It's super simple, and it's not hard. You don't have to have a PhD in order to extricate yourself from a cult. You just need to have a working sort of brain, I suppose, and you need to push yourself to that moment. So I guess that would be my biggest advice, to just veer from anything that was different. And I guess no one else did mention this. Just doing cult comparison is really powerful as well. Yeah. I think, what's the book called by Lawrence Wright about Scientology? Going Clear and the Prison of Belief. I think Scientology and the Prison of Belief. If you haven't read that, I read that while I was an active witness, and I found it absolutely fascinating. I gave that to my grandma because we were sharing books all the time, and she was interested in trying to get to have a relationship with a grandson, and reading was so important to me. So that was one way that she did it. So anytime I got done with a book, I handed it off to her. Well, when I gave her that, she took 3 days, made a couple of notes, and handed it back to me and said, I don't want to read it. And I was just blown away. I'm like, oh, but it's so fascinating. It's so interesting. And I know you're a sucker for celebrity culture, and you get all the stories and all that stuff. And she's like, no, this Hubbard guy, he just sounds like he's crazy. And, their beliefs are so weird. I think it's a waste of my time. And I was like, okay, that's cool. So then me and another brother in my congregation, we went to go see the documentary when it came out. And we had asked a couple other people, hey, do you want to go and see it? And the exact same thing happened. No, we don't really need to see that. No, I'm not interested in that. I don't want to learn about that. And that's why I think it's so important, especially if you're early on in your waking up process. Instead of going down the rabbit hole of just like force feeding your brain all of the, quote unquote apostate websites and all the arguments against Watchtower, take like a week or 2 weeks or a month or a year, however long it might take you, and slow down and think about, well, what is an argument? What's a logical syllogism? Just go through some like very basic things. And then once you add the actual arguments against Watchtower on top of that, your life will be pristine. It will just take off like a rocket ship, and you won't believe, because you'll be able to identify it and close it down, and there's no stress or anxiety that gets attached with it. You're just like, bang, that's not right. Bang, that's not right. Bang, that's not right. And all the rest of it. But yeah, I guess that would be like my two things: is do some cult comparison, get the Book of Mormon, and just read through that and think about Jesus visiting America and how funny that is. Go into like Scientology, because there's a lot of good comparisons when it comes to shunning and the overworking of their members. And yeah, I guess on top of what everyone else said, that would be the only additions that I would have.
Thanks a lot, Wally.
I have quotes and shit if you guys want to. Oh, sorry. I have quotes and stuff if you guys want to hear some funny things that I found personally impactful.
Yeah, sure. Just before you do that, though, it's interesting that you should bring up Scientology, because I was actually watching a documentary on Scientology before we started doing the live stream, and I've never really looked into Scientology, religion, but I can't believe how many similarities there are between the Witnesses and Scientology, especially in the way that they deal with dissident members.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost identical. And after I woke up, I started, I read Combating Cult Mind Control by Stephen Hassan. And I had the same reaction then when he was talking about his experience in the Moonies. And I could not believe how similar some of the Mooney doctrines were to Jehovah's Witnesses. So I think you make a really important point when you look at other cults and see how similar they are to Witnesses. There's no way that Witnesses can be, the one true religion or God's one true organization if it is so similar to all of these really terrible, destructive organizations.
Well, they could be still true, but you'd have to evaluate their claims. But anyway, I won't be pedantic on you. But yeah, Combating Cult Mind Control was really good, because I remember giving that to my ex-wife. Yeah. I'm like, hey, why don't you check out this book? And that's when I was, if you've ever followed my channel or anything, then you know kind of the story. But yeah, she read that and was like, what the hell? This is a lot of the things that we do. But yeah, that's a really good book. It was almost like sad when it was updated and then they had a section about Jehovah's Witnesses in it, because I was like, oh no, people will look at this and think it's apostate, because it specifies the witnesses. But I think Lloyd's addition to it was great, so it doesn't really matter.
I was chatting to somebody on Reddit a while back, and he's PMO, but his wife is still like full PME, and he said that they were watching Leah Remini's documentary on Scientology, and they were watching something about the bite model as well, and his PME wife said to him, isn't Satan clever for making the definition of a cult fit Jehovah's Witnesses?
Good job, Satan.
Oh, that was absolutely hilarious. Yeah, so Wally, you said you have some quotes.
Yeah, there's just like a couple things that at certain points in my life, like I read it and it really spoke to me. Oh boy, this is why you need to be prepared. Okay, this is a little bit long. This is from Francis Bacon from the Advancement of Learning. Francis Bacon, he basically was one of the pioneers of epistemology and helped us understand what a collection of data actually looks like and how we can reach reasonable conclusions from putting that thing together. Anyway, page 34, the Advancement of Learning, in this little beautiful old copy. See, it's all worn out and the thing's falling off. Anyway, it says, quote, Another error is impatience of doubt, and haste to assertion without due and mature suspension of judgment. For the two ways of contemplation are not unlike the two ways of action commonly spoken of by the ancients, the one plain and smooth in the beginning, and in the end impassable, the other rough and troublesome in the entrance, but after a while fair and even. So it is in contemplation. If a man will begin with certainties, he will end in doubts. But if he will be content to begin with doubts, he shall end in certainties. That is like one of the most... I'm just going to read it one more time. If a man will begin with certainties, he will end in doubts. But if he will be content to begin with doubts, he shall end in certainties. And it's such a freeing way to open up your worldview about, okay, you can't start with conclusions. And if you do, you're kind of just being a moron. You have to start with doubting and questions and build arguments from there. And you can't do it the other way around. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing. Anyway, any comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a really powerful quote. I've actually never heard it before, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah,
and that's the opposite. Sorry, go on, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, yeah, that quote is really interesting, but I actually think what Wally said earlier on is probably more interesting because it's more relevant to the Watchtower. You compared the Watchtower belief system to a mattress. I think that's so true, because what do you do on a mattress? You either go to sleep or you get fucked. I
think you're bang on.
So, I think I might start calling it the mattress.
Yeah. You either mentally go to sleep or you mentally get fucked. Okay, there you go. The worldwide watcher. Worldwide.
Right.
That's hilarious.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, that was really good. I've forgotten what I was going to say now.
Okay, it was worth it.
It was.
Yeah, our lives were made better by it.
Yeah. Okay, let's take some comments.
Oh, can I give one other quote? Or
yeah, sure.
Okay, I'll just do one more. Would you rather have more Francis Bacon or Thoreau?
Let's have Thoreau.
Thoreau, okay. I guess this would just be like a word of encouragement. My favorite book in the entire world is Walden. And are you guys familiar with Walden and who Thoreau was? He basically just didn't throw everything away, but he moved out to a pond and he built a cabin and he wanted to essentially figure out what life was all about. And he did this through solitude and writing and like book learning. Anyway, should I do this one? I don't want to bore people for too long. Yeah, I'll just do this. We'll go to the end. Give me a second. Okay, here we go. Quote, this was his conclusion after he had lived out there. I learned this, at least by my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. He will put some things behind. He will pass an invisible boundary. New, universal, and more liberal laws will begin to establish themselves around and within him, or the old laws will be expanded and interpreted in his favor in a more liberal sense, and he will live with the license of a higher order of beings. In proportions as he simplifies his life, the laws of the universe will appear less complex, and solitude will not be solitude, nor poverty poverty, nor weakness weakness. If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now, put the foundations under them. And I guess that just like speaks to my point is do the hard work. It doesn't matter if, you have like these lofty goals or something. When you're leaving a cult, sometimes we slow down once we've left the cult, but keep dreaming and then put the foundation under it and you'll get there. It's just how a meritocracy society works, but I guess everyone's not in a meritocracy society, so whatever.
Thanks very much, Rudy. Yeah, that's really insightful. Okay, let's take some comments now. Coastal TV shows. There is value to our own experience when we don't identify with it. Just because we believe something doesn't make it true. Truth for me has been entirely redefined. Yeah. That's a very good point. Just because, and the thing is, I've heard witnesses say this: just because you believe something doesn't mean it's true. But they have such a lack of self-awareness that they don't apply that to themselves. They don't apply that to their own beliefs, which is just, it's crazy. But that's how you think when you're indoctrinated.
Yeah, I think it's mostly arrogance, though, right? Like, everything is true because I believe it's true.
Yeah.
Cool.
Gaia121 says, while JWs are in the level of cognitive dissonance, while JWs are in the level of cognitive dissonance they have is astounding. Everyone else is a cult. They are sane and normal. The second they leave, they see how much the same they were to other cults. Yeah, absolutely. I know it was definitely like that for me. Even after I'd woken up, I was absolutely amazed by how similar witness doctrine was to these other cults. I just couldn't believe it.
I think even active witnesses can fully make the comparisons as well. I think that's why it's such a powerful tool in helping people sort of wiggle their way out of their own head.
Yeah. Any more comments? Jenny Bergman. Wally, I think that's why support groups are so important. I didn't know about logical fallacies until Reddit, and then I dove deep into untangling all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the collective gathering of information and just having different people's perspective. Sure, even if 90% of them are completely terrible, 10% of them might be right, or it's 50-50. It doesn't really matter. Don't be scared of information. Don't be scared of facts. And the more of it you gather, then you can actually, once you understand how it works, then you can actually build upon that and see, okay, well, this is true, this is crap, this is true, this is crap. And you absolutely, just like Esther says, untangle.
Yeah.
That's one of the ideas that I've heard, some people mention or some people being afraid to examine the evidence and perhaps realize that they're wrong about something. Might you be afraid that you're wrong about it? And one of the best responses, I'm obviously paraphrasing it, was just like, no, I would be excited to find out that I was wrong about something, because that means now that I've obtained this new evidence, that means I am now wrong about one less thing than I was before. So you should be happy when you find evidence that changes your view, because that gives you an opportunity to be better, to know better.
That is so true, and it is so exciting. And once you realize that, man, your life just gets so cool after that. It's like, okay, now I want to know all of the things that I'm wrong about, because now I can explore more. It gives me more to learn, and then I'm not just sleeping on the mattress.
Yeah, it's funny. I read a book by some psychologists, cognitive scientists, and they were saying that when you encounter information that confirms your beliefs, you get a hit of dopamine. But if you encounter information that is contrary to what you believe, it's the same circuit, the same cognitive circuit as discussed. Like if you see something that physically revolts you, the same kind of circuit is going on. It's like you just want to run away from it. But I do think what Matt and Wally has said is true. You can actually kind of force yourself out of that mentality where you say, look, I just want to know what's true. And you can kind of sometimes step out of that kind of psychological mindset and say, look, I just want to know what is. And if you can do that, I totally agree with what Wally said. It's very liberating. Sometimes it's a bit scary, but it really is liberating to kind of have this mentality where you can kind of think to yourself, well, to some degree, I think I can figure stuff out if I give myself the time and the opportunity to encounter that information. I mean, I might not be able to figure everything out, but at least I can give it a good shot, because I know how to process information and I'm not bound to any particular ideological viewpoint. I can just form an opinion based on the information that comes my way. So I thought that was really interesting what you guys said.
Yeah, thank you. D Lightning, true, Wally. They don't want to think for themselves. They want others to tell them what to do and feel and think.
Children. They're kind of held at a sort of stasis of children mentally.
Yeah.
I don't want to think about what's right and wrong. I just want to be told. Like, do you want me to vacuum the stairs or do you not want me to vacuum the stairs? Do you want me to clean my room? Do you not want me to clean my room? No, I want you to clean your room. Pretty basic stuff, but unfortunately for witnesses, it's like this brain buster.
Yeah. I saw on a video recently, I think it might have been one of your videos, Mark, where there was a study that showed that if where the participants in the study had greater confidence in their beliefs, even if they couldn't explain the beliefs themselves, but the sheer fact that they felt that somebody else could do a good job of explaining it, it made them believe it more. Am I describing that correctly?
That's a good summary. That's actually the same book that I just referred to a minute ago. It's called The Knowledge Illusion. It's this idea that I think the human brain can hold something like something very small, but I'm probably getting it wrong here. Like something like 6 gigabytes. I mean, it's like really quite small, the amount of information the human brain can hold. So we really think we know more than we really do. Mm. And if we have this idea, well, someone knows, right? The information is available out there somewhere. We have this kind of illusion that we understand the subject fully, or at least better than we really do. And that's why often people will kind of, you'll be talking with them and they'll say, well, where did you get that information? Say, well, I kind of worked it out myself, or maybe I read it in a book. Whereas they probably just Googled it, 2 days ago and read 2 lines on a Wikipedia page, and then they think they kind of have this, broad and deep understanding. And I think for witnesses that's so relevant, because the governing body really, the witnesses believe, understand the Bible better than anyone. No one can understand it better than them. And then the governing body then passes it down to the witnesses. And so I'm pretty sure that was true for me, because I just devoured Watchtower literature, and I really felt I understood the Bible. And then when I kind of stepped out and I realized I really did not know anything about the Bible, it's a completely different book than witnesses are led to believe. You really, I know from personal experience, you really can think that you understand something well, just because you have access to information that you consider is authoritative, or has like some special access to information that you don't.
Yeah, I completely identify with that. I remember, and it makes me think of an interview that, or a story that, for any of you who know Fifth, Cliff Henderson talked about how when he would be reading, things about the prophecies and the publications, I had basically the same moment of reading. I was a book study conductor at the time of when we were going through the Revelation book. I remember reading through it and thinking, man, I would have never got this if I were reading the Bible on my own. How wonderful it is that these guys understand this, and they obviously get it. So I would never have come away with this. And of course, now that I'm on, this side of the fence, I'm like, oh, well, that's because they were making it all up. But because I used them as an authority figure, I thought they knew what they were talking about. So I just went along with it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, are there any more comments? Oh, my good friend Dennis. Great point, Wally, comparing Watchtower to a mattress. JWs don't want to get out of their comfort zone and think for themselves. Absolutely. This is going back to what you were speaking about just now, Mark. It's like outsourcing your thinking ability to someone else. And it's really sad that people do that, and that, while we were witnesses, we did that.
Yeah, very true. I mean, I think that kind of touches on a point that Wally made, is that will I vacuum the stairs, or will I not vacuum the stairs? I mean, people, it's kind of like a trivial example, but that's really what people are asking Watchtower to do. Mm-hmm. It's like in Eric Hoffer's book, The True Believer. I don't know if you've read that, but he was talking about why so many young men were joining the Nazi Party, and one of them said they wanted freedom from freedom. That, like the idea of like a fully autonomous and free life was just overwhelming for them. They just wanted structure. They wanted authority figures to kind of guide them, tell them how to behave, tell them what to wear, tell them what attitudes to have, and that was a source of comfort. And I think high control groups are very similar to that. That people, I think, I'm including myself now, are a bit just overwhelmed by reality. I mean, like when I was a teenager, I kind of was confused, a bit depressed. I mean, what do I do? What's going on in the world? What am I going to do with my life? But if you have like a father figure in like the organization that comes along and says, don't worry, we know everything, just follow us, believe what we tell you, you're going to have everlasting life. And I fell for it. And I feel for people who kind of allow themselves to do that, because I understand my mentality when I joined, that I was like the people joining the Nazi party. Like, I wanted freedom from freedom. It was just too much for me. And the father figure notion of, well, it's okay, just come with us and you'll be all right. That was kind of how I was. And it's it's a dangerous trap that you could fall into when you don't have that kind of self-confidence or autonomous existence. I think that's the kind of person that slips into it. And I was certainly one of those people.
Yeah, I think they target that sort of mental state, right? I mean, because that's where people are going to be most successful. You drive around and wait for someone to be overwhelmed with the world. Oh, well, my grandma just died, and I haven't actually, since I was a kid, dealt with the problem of, well, death. Sure, everything around me dies. Every banana I've ever bought, every car I've ever driven, every sponge I've ever bought, and all of it dies. Now it's a person, and now I'm confused. Oh, well, what am I going to do? Someone comes along with the answer. It's like, okay.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's move on. I've got two very quick examples that I just want to share. So let me see if I can get this right one last time. Okay, right. So this is a quote that I came across on Twitter not too long ago. Let's see if I can zoom in on this. There we go. This is a quote from Charles Taze Russell. Believe it or not, I found this on the Internet Archive, which is a great resource, by the way, not just for ExJW stuff. It's just a great resource, regardless. But this is a quote. This website, what it actually does, it shows you what websites look like before they've been changed. So, like, say for instance, a website has recently been updated. You can go backwards in the calendar to see what it looked like on a particular day in the past. Yeah, so I've used it a few times and it's really good. But this is a quote from Watchtower by Charles Taze Russell in 1881. And this is what he has to say about New Light. And regular viewers of my channel will be fully aware of what my feelings are on New Light, because I talk about it all the time. But it makes no logical sense whatsoever. And here is Charles Taze Russell saying that himself. So he says, if we were following a man, undoubtedly, it would be different with us. Undoubtedly, one human idea would contradict another, and that which was light 1 or 2 or 6 years ago would be regarded as darkness now. But with God, there is no variableness, neither shadow of turning, and so it is with truth. Any knowledge or light coming from God must be like its author. A new view of truth never can contradict a former truth. New light never extinguishes old light, but it adds to it. If you were lighting up a building containing 7 gas jets, you would not extinguish one every time you lighted another, but you would add one light to another, and they would be in harmony and thus give increase of light. So is it with the light of truth. The true increase is by adding to, not by substituting one for another. Now, as far as New Light goes, debunking New Light, that, as far as I'm concerned, is a slam dunk. It's like case closed. What happened after he died, where the whole thing just got reversed, and now New Light can contradict and substitute old light, and it just makes no sense. But what Charles Taze Russell is saying here is spot on. It's absolutely spot on.
Yeah, Riley, you're just not keeping up with Jehovah's Chariot, man. That's your problem.
Yeah, for
honestly.
anyone who wants to see some good examples of that, I don't remember if it's directly how deep you have to go into Wfax to find it, but there is probably on the New Light page somewhere, there's an extra link that will take you to all of the flip-flops that they've done over the course of the past century, up until 2016, I believe, is when it was last updated. But it is insane when you open that document up and just see how much they've gone back and forth on so many different things. So that would be another helpful resource too, just to help you get an idea of New Light and how often this organization has used it.
I think just the generation teaching by itself is like one of the clearest examples. It just, I mean, it's the righteous people, it's the wicked people, it's the righteous people again. Put that together with what you just said, boom, you're done. Woo! Moving on from progressive revelation. It is the silliest Christian doctrine I've come across. I don't understand it.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, the fact that New Light can replace or contradict Old Light is, that's ridiculous in itself. But where it becomes particularly harmful is the fact that a lot of the doctrinal flip-flops have been things that have cost people their lives. And, the organization takes no responsibility for that whatsoever, which is disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. I mean, it's one thing to have a ridiculous doctrine that doesn't make sense and that is easily debunked. It's quite another thing to have a doctrine that actually kills people.
Facts.
Okay, so I have one last example, and this is from a Reddit thread which Matt very kindly shared with me earlier on today. Right now, although this thread is on the ExJW subreddit, all of these references come from Watchtower's own literature. And I won't go too deep into it, but basically you can use Watchtower's own literature to debunk 607 BCE. So these are all things that Watchtower has publicized in its own literature, all the years of the kings of Babylon, when they started reigning, how long their reign was. And you can actually start, we're using 539 BCE as a starting point, which was the end of Belshazzar's rule. Add up all the years of all the reigns of all the subsequent kings, and it actually comes to 587 BCE, which is the date that is unanimously agreed upon by historians and archaeologists as being the year when Jerusalem was destroyed. And you can actually, this is just simple math. This can't be apostate lies. This is just simple math from Watchtower's own publications that disprove the whole 607 BCE teaching.
I remember doing this with one of the times an elder came around and heard that I was, or noticed that I was starting to slip away, as it were. And I brought this up to him. I'm like, we can only use Watchtower publications and the Bible, and this is the date. And still, he said, well, no, because that's not what the publications teach. And you're just like, and this is the problem of not being able to actually think like a rational person. That's exactly where it gets you. The publications teach this, and they also teach this. It's either 587 or it's not 587. What are you saying? The publications say it's 587. Well, no, they also say 607. Okay, well, just stop listening to them because they don't know what they're talking about. Easy.
Well, that's the thing with the whole 607 thing. That's like the quote, the Francis Bacon quote that you said earlier, Wally. It was starting with a conclusion. They started with a conclusion to make it fit. Oh, we lost someone. Oh, we lost Matt.
Yeah, Matt's been gone for like 2 or 3 minutes. I think.
I didn't see because I was
reading interruptions.
Oh, okay. Or maybe he had a internet connection problem.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah. They started with a conclusion. They started with that. They had to make it fit 1914, so they started with that and then worked backwards. That's why they hold on so fast to that date, even though their own publications disprove it.
Yeah, it's like the JW broadcast with David Splain of do the math. It's like, well, we know that this is the date of the flood. Therefore, we're going to work backwards and say, you know, well, the Sphinx couldn't have been built at that time. And they just have it so flip-flopped in their heads. But once you can identify it, bliss.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not only is it incorrect, it's intellectually dishonest to do that. You know, starting with a conclusion and working backwards to prove your conclusion. And it's also extremely arrogant, because it's basically saying, I cannot be proven wrong.
It's just not a way to truth tell.
Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's a bit like what Matt was saying before about you know, getting to first principles. I mean, I think where a lot of the Watchtower reasoning goes wrong is that just the clear dogmatic assumption that the Bible can't be wrong. I mean, this is why they go awry with the 607 thing. They just say, well, Jeremiah said it would be desolated 70 years, and so we just count back from this date, and this must be the case. So they just do whatever is necessary to make those numbers gel together, instead of saying, well, what if we just take the facts independently of each other and place them together, what conclusion will we come to? They just say, well, this is true, so if that number is true, then we have to make it fit, because we'll do whatever it takes to make the Bible agree with itself in different portions. And that's what they're doing. They're starting with a conclusion, and they're making just fallacious assumptions to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've been on a ministry with and heard witnesses speaking to the householder, and the householder says, well, I don't believe in the Bible. I don't believe that it's the inspired and inerrant word of God. And then the person I'm working with says, can I just show you a scripture to disprove that? And then they open the Bible and turn to 2 Timothy. All scripture is inspired of God. And they think that is proof.
You're a fool.
You know, they think that is proof.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm just thinking, it makes absolutely no sense to reason that way. You know, that's like me having just a blank piece of paper and then tell you that it's a £10 note. And you say, oh, I don't believe that's a £10 note. And I'll say, yes, it is. Look what it says on the back. And I've written £10 on the back. So what I've written proves that is, you know, I think a lot of witnesses don't actually understand proof as and evidence as concepts.
Yeah.
Nope. Just turn to Daddy Watchtower and they'll tell us.
Yeah.
Well, what do the publications say?
Yeah. Absolutely.
What do you say?
Okay, so we're almost at the end now. Let's just take a couple of comments before we go. Sam, can you put the link to that Reddit post in the chat or description? I will definitely put it in the video description as soon as we go offline. Awake.com. Don't forget that JWs are extremely superstitious, and any thoughts that they may be the start of waking up, they immediately put it down to the negative thinking induced by demons. Yep, absolutely right. Absolutely right. I've actually been asked, while I was still a witness, I was asked if I've been looking at apostate literature, because I questioned the way the elders handle a particular situation. And I hadn't gone anywhere near, I was full PME. I hadn't gone anywhere near apostate literature, but that's the thing.
It's a first.
Patty Osborne, if Jehovah is killing all but JWs at Armageddon, who are the people who are getting another chance to learn about Jehovah?
No
That's us.
thanks.
One down.
according to witness theology, that will be the resurrected ones, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
All the people that never heard of any, what's a Jehovah's Witness, which is a good chunk of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's more people that have lived and died than people who are on the earth now.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say 90% of them get resurrected, the earth is going to be even more overcrowded than it is now, and witnesses will be even more outnumbered.
Imagine coming and like actually being resurrected, and the first thing you see is just like mountains of dead bodies. Like,
Yeah.
you're like, oh wow, the supernatural is real. God had it right all along. And the first thing you just see like a pile of dead bodies, like, oh my.
Well, welcome back. Sorry about the dead bodies. We haven't taken care of that.
We're trying to find the janitors. We tried to train them all to be janitors, and none of them can seem to freaking clean this shit up.
I think J.R. Rutherford said antimatter would take care of that. So
Yeah.
he has his bases covered. Yeah.
Sammy Tube says, and they still teach 607 BC and 1919 in the current book study, Pure Worship. The ego refused to amend or verbally correct it in an overproduced broadcast video. Yeah, they can't let go of that teaching, because that is the whole basis of everything. But in particular, it's the basis for the governing body's authority, because apparently they were selected in 1919 by Jesus himself, no less. So they will never ever let go of that. Guy121, I'm still processing Mark's dopamine disgust comment. That explains so much. Could you please share again the name of the book you were quoting from?
Oh yeah, it's called The Knowledge Illusion. I think it's by Sloman and Fernbach, if I remember correctly, but it's called The Knowledge Illusion. Yeah, it's really, really interesting read for sure.
The knowledge illusion or delusion?
Illusion.
Delusion.
No,
okay,
illusion.
I'll search for it and I'll put a link to it in the description as well.
Sure thing.
Jordan from the Shunned Experience. Evidence doesn't matter to JWs when you actually put evidence to them. It's just have faith. Yeah.
Gotta have faith. Faith.
I found when I was in that the JWs who did believe in evidence, they were even worse than the ones who only believed in faith.
That's my brother. He thinks he has it right, and he's just so backwards.
Yeah.
It's aggravating.
They were actually worse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I was one of those people.
I think I was one of those as well, because I would say that in Hebrews, is it Hebrews 11? Faith is the assured expectation of things hoped for.
Mm-hmm.
So in the original Greek, the word that we translate into faith meant title deed. I remember researching this at some point. So if you buy a house and you have the title deed to that house, that title deed is proof. It's physical proof that the house belongs to you. So the biblical idea of faith, at least from the JW perspective, isn't blind faith. It relies on evidence, just like the title deed. So this is how I would reason it. So yeah, that's what I would say when I was on the ministry. We don't just have blind faith. There has to be evidence. But as you know, witnesses have a very skewed concept of what evidence actually is.
That's a wild ride.
Yeah, I know, right? It just goes to show, like I was saying earlier, you can think in a logical and reasonable way and still be wrong if your logic and reasoning is based on faulty information.
Yeah, you can't make mashed potatoes. You could have all the technique right to make mashed potatoes, but if you have a bag of carrots, then you can't make proper mashed potatoes. But I know how to make it. No, you don't.
Yeah.
You're a fool.
Exactly. And children do that all the time. In fact, I have a funny story about a friend of mine who was a nanny, and she was looking after these two kids, and she was pregnant herself at the time. So one of the kids said to her, "Why is your belly so big?" And she said, "Oh, because I have a baby in my belly." And then he said to her, "Oh, when I eat a lot of ice cream, my belly gets big because I have lots of ice cream in my belly. Did you eat a baby?"
That's pretty funny.
That was perfectly logical reasoning, but he was still wrong because his logic was based on faulty information.
That's hilarious.
And that typifies how witnesses reason.
Yeah.
Okay, any more comments?
Mm-hmm.
Yolanda Griggs, could you also please put each panel's YouTube channel information as well? That's already in the video description, Yolanda. Thanks very much for asking that. Any more? No, I think we're done.
Ooh,
So thanks very much, guys. Thanks very much, guys, for joining me for this. I really do appreciate the time that you've taken out, and also the research and effort that you put into this. I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. I enjoyed it.
We'll have to collaborate again soon. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
So what we need to do is collaborate on
first 2-hour meeting.
Sorry, say that again, Wally.
I said what we need to do is collaborate on one of my goofy skits. You guys could all like be a different embodiment.
Yeah.
And also, as far as links in the description go, I think we need to get Matt's hair gel because he has like the best hair of it. That needs to go in the link in the description as well.
Yeah, Matt has to
well, before I do that, I need to get a sponsorship going. So just give me
okay. That's fair. That's fair.
And I'll put a link in the description to the wax that I use.
Ooh, perfect.
We can cover all ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. This shine doesn't come about by accident.
The ExJW grooming show.
Ooh.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much, guys. Thanks a lot. I really do appreciate it.
All right, we'll see you later.
See ya. And thank you, viewers, as well, for joining and tuning in. Thank you for all of your comments and all of your participation. Very much appreciated. If you haven't done so already, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel with notifications so that you get notified of all future videos. Please proceed to the Jexit in an orderly fashion, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching to the very end of the video. If you haven't already done so, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. If you like my work and want to help me continue doing it, please support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Jexit_2020.